So, guys, in case you don't know, this current administration is going to be borrowing to fund this spending that the National Assembly has just approved. Nigerians, we are in a serious problem. Just listen to this analyst and the important information he has got to give to Nigerians.
But the question I think we should be asking is, how are you going to fund this supplementary budget? Where's the funding going to come from? That's the question nobody's asking.
Maybe from savings from fuel subsidy removal?
We haven't seen those savings, unfortunately, and it's not really coming through the system in the way and manner we'd like it to see. So there needs to be some transparency in how this would be. What I know is the fact that they're looking at a between $1.2, $1.5 billion budget support from the World Bank, which the World Bank confirmed they're processing that loan at the moment. At best, that will bring in maybe 1 trillion or 1.2 trillion. So there's still a deficit to finance. But the irony of this is that this year's budget is already with an 11 trillion naira deficit. So you add the 2 trillion to it. So you're going to be looking at about 13.7, 14 trillion deficit by the end of this year. 97% of our revenues are going towards debt service. This administration has already drawn down 4 trillion already from Ways and Means. We're waiting for the central bank to reconcile their accounts, and also to a monetary policy committee meeting is long overdue. So there are many issues, but now the fiscal space is taking these challenges because I think there's still some opaqueness in the reporting. Because we see the expenditure side, but we haven't seen how they're going to finance it, and we don't know what the current state of the revenue, because the revenue projections for this year was 10 trillion. So out of that 10 trillion, we're already in November. How much of that 10 trillion that was projected for revenue has actually come in? And these are the questions that we need to ask, not just to the expenditure side. Where are the revenues? How much savings have we made from the subsidy?
So let's talk about revenue, because we've talked about it a number of times that one of the challenges or big challenges that would face this particular administration would be revenue. So beyond our spending habits is that we don't even have the money, as you've outlined, to service some of these expenses. What's the prospect for us? Because as you mentioned, we have the details of the expenditure, but there are estimations and projections in terms of how these revenues will come in. Beyond the World Bank loan, what other options are available? Where are we going to get the money to provide for these expenses? Then I'd like to ask you as well, is it justified? I'm sure you read the details of the supplementary budget, the amount of money going to defense, money going to the FCT, 100 billion, money going to the State House, money going to agriculture and the likes. Is it justified at this time?
Well, justification, I don't know, in the sense that there was already a budget this year for these departments. So why do all these people need a supplementary budget at this time of the year, which is like, what, 2 months to the end of the year?
Yeah.
If we had to be realistic, or is it that they're just grappling with it because the new administration came in May? So you come in and then you are going to the assembly to approve a budget for you for this amount of money, and there's only 2 months left in the year. What is so urgent? And why isn't the emphasis on preparing the budget for next year and make the adjustments? Or is it that you have drawn down on Ways and Means, and then you are now coming to seek approval for this budgetary expenditure to cover your spending? So for me, the timing is a bit difficult for me to comprehend. So justification is a different thing, and I think that's why you've seen the public outcry in terms of, the optics. Optics is very important, because we have 130 million Nigerians in multidimensional poverty. So a lot of these things become very insensitive, and, you really need to manage the optics, otherwise you see the outcry that we've been seeing. While you can talk about justification, the question is that 2 months to the end of the year,
Why?
And then how have you financed this? Has this been money that has been spent? So that's where we have the challenges. My own focus is seeing what next year's budget is going to look like.
Okay, so many things are popping in my head. But number one, all the monies hitherto spent before this supplementary probably were not in this budget that we're running the cycle now. Sort of like those monies generated from the Ways and Means. Number one, how are we going to reconcile them? That's number one. Number two, if you check the MTEF 2024 up to 2026, the revenue projections vis-a-vis the borrowing, vis-a-vis the economic growth, it is said that the best possible we'll do will be about, I think, 4.8%, it's less than 5% growth. And it's going to systematically grow from about 3-point-something%, then it ends at about 4% for this medium-term expenditure framework. For the fact that we're not having that level of growth, and what they base their parameters on for raising those revenues are not cogent enough, then what do we do? Because, I mean, I read through it. So what they expect to change in customs, for instance, will be, okay, reducing smuggling, improvement on training, improvement of enforcement and I mean, we're not seeing really empirical line of sight in most of those things.
Okay. I think, it's important also not to mix apples with oranges, because the medium-term expenditure framework is a projection for next year's budgets, and what they're saying for next year is they're projecting 26 trillion budget and 17 trillion in revenues, leaving a deficit of about 9 trillion. I think that's the take from that. That's also what they're trying to do. The medium-term economic framework and fiscal strategy is you can't prepare a budget without doing this. So that's a statutory requirement. So that's just the starting point for the budget for next year. So yes, there will be a lot of assumptions and, putting together a framework. So when they fine-tune this, when the budget comes out, you see more fine-tuning, and then you can begin to make some sort of objective stance. That's why I said earlier that the most important thing now is to see what your budget for next year would be. These are the sort of things that, we need to put into perspective. But again, what we all have to understand is what the problem is and how do we resolve it. The fact is that we have maxed out our debt limits, at this point in time. And the biggest challenge for us is that there's an opaque structure within the revenues, especially what we have sold forward, which we don't know. We still don't know, even the 17 trillion revenues from next year, how much of that revenue has already been taken in terms of forwards and swaps. So that is really where the reconciliation needs to be done. Until we do that, until we know that position, then it will be very difficult for us to go forward. Because you can't continue with Ways and Means financing. It's illegal. You need to restructure that. Even if, as you've said in the introduction, that they've ordered the debt management office to go to the capital markets to borrow money. Are you going to crowd out the private sector? How much are the deposits that are in the banking system?
Okay. Well, if I heard you correctly, you said earlier that you can't see the savings from the fuel subsidy removal when you were talking about revenue.
Yes.
But is it not the case that the states that used to share from FAC allocation 600 billion, now they share more money?
Yes.
Yeah, so why do you say you can't see that? So, I mean, that's like a follow-up to what you said earlier. You may want to clarify what you said. But I would like to ask you, what do you think of the proposal recently to amend the CBN Act, to expand the board, reduce the powers of the CBN governor, and also put a clause in the CBN Act to say that nobody should go into partisan politics, even if, as I have argued, that provision in the CBN Act is already very clear that a CBN governor must devote his time wholly to the job.
Well, on the first question, yes, the FAC allocations have come. I mean, they've increased significantly, without a doubt. But we're trying to find out that, where is that coming from? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So when you're talking about revenues, is it from taxes? Is it from, can you quantify? That's what I'm trying to explain to you. When you say, okay, FAC has increased by X amount of money, is it from the FIRS or is it from the subsidy savings? Did NNPC actually remit something to you? Because you are supposed to be, NNPC is supposed to be remitting money to the Federation account. That's really what we want to see. I don't know how much NNPC has been remitting to the Federation account. So out of the FAC you're talking about, how much came from what NNPC is paying to the Federation account? That's the problem of Nigeria. What has been how we have been surviving in Nigeria now is through FIRS and Ways and Means. NNPC has not been remitting to the Federation account. So let us know what NNPC is starting to remit to the Federation account between May and now. Then you can begin to get an understanding of that so-called savings on the subsidy. So I haven't seen that number. All I just see is the fact that the FAC allocations have gone up. So that's what I'm trying to say. As far as the Central Bank Act is concerned, for me it's a knee-jerk reaction. There's nothing wrong with the Central Bank Act as it is. If the central bank governor contravenes the CBN Act, then that's a different issue, because the CBN had a board, there's governance, and board members were sitting in meetings when the central bank was breaching CBN Acts. So people deliberately breached the act. So the issue is to look at Section 38, which talks about the ways and means, and to find a way to resolve the ways and means financing, which is currently now at 30 trillion. Okay? The whole of the pension, so going back to the point of the capital markets, the whole of the pension funds in Nigeria is 16 trillion. Banks have deposits of close to 50 trillion. Ways and means alone is 30 trillion. So you can see that the money that Ways and Means has been financed is twice the pension fund's money. So do you want to now go and take all the pension fund money or all the money in the banking deposits? Where will the corporates and the SMEs and the rest of the economy, where will they borrow? So government cannot go out and crowd out the private sector, because you're going to stunt the growth of the economy.
All right, so the president is looking at, or has said, that he's looking at a $1 trillion economy by 2026. We have debated how realistic this would be, asked questions around this, but I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Is it achievable?
Well, it was on this program that we first talked about Nigeria as a 1 trillion economy, and all of a sudden, everybody has picked up on it. So let's clarify something very quickly, and which is something that we need to understand, and I'll say this again. Nigeria is already a $1 trillion economy. Okay, I went out yesterday. I went to an art exhibition that's called Artex, run by this very brilliant entrepreneurial young lady, Tokini Peterside, and many paintings there. I saw some of Bruce Onabakweya's work there. What was on display only for Bruce Onabakweya was easily worth 600 million naira. So the art exhibition and all the exhibits there are in excess of billions of naira. That's an economy there. After that, I went out. I went to a restaurant called Rococo. Then there,
where is that?
In Victoria Island, just
okay.
on Lagoon. And I started talking to the manager. They employ 200 people. 200 people. One restaurant. And if you look at the multiplier effect, their supplies, so one restaurant is contributing to maybe 500 people. So the potential of this economy is already at 1 trillion. The problem we have in Nigeria are the people managing our economy. In 2014, our GDP was already close to $600 billion. We've lost $300 billion since then, or 250. If we had gained 250 billion in the last years, our economy would be at 850 billion. Right now, 150 billion shy of 1 trillion. So it is the managers of our economy that is retarding the Nigerian economy. That's what I keep saying. So when they keep talking about 1 trillion, it's not 1 trillion. It's how you're going to go from 1 trillion to 2 trillion or 3 trillion. But because of the managers, now that the GDP is now down to under 400 because of 400 billion because of devaluation, how do you go from 400 billion to 1 trillion in 2 years. It's mission impossible.
Very good, and it's good that you effectively clarified it and put pay to that, because we had a lot of people coming to argue that it is possible, and I even gave them the facts by saying even if we grow 20% every year for those 2 years, it's still going to be difficult.
It is going to be difficult, but what I'm trying to say, let's make the distinction.
No, I know, I get your point.
When you have an economy that is a potential 1 trillion, Nigeria should be a top 20 global economy.
No, we know it's visible. You know,
so that's what I'm saying. You know. So it's just that we are not able to realize that potential. We're working, it's like a factory that is operating at 40% capacity.
We know, and it's good you've clarified it, because we're just clarifying based on facts, you know, not, we know what happens in this country. But I want to talk to you about this nebulous nature of our financing.
Which financing? Government financing, public financing, or private financing?
Government financing. So take, for instance, Afrexim Bank. That money we're going to take there, we hear there's securitization going on. This new 10 billion we're going to take to, we hear is securitized against future funds of the NLNG. Vis-a-vis, we're also hearing that now, for a refinery like the Dangote refinery, they've said, oh, the NNPC will be able to supply them products. But NNPC still claims it's got swap deals going on. So, understanding this, I think you should help us, you know, break it down. We've securitized most of...
Let's not get confused about all these swaps and securitization, and there's nothing issue. It's a question of reconciliation, which is what I've told you. You know, we need, once you reconcile, you know what we talked about next year's revenue projections are 17 trillion. How much of that is compromised by swaps? Have you discounted swaps from it? So it's very simple. We shouldn't. But
we don't have this information, so it's not that simple.
No, you are journalists. Then go and engage the appropriate government officials or check their websites. You know, which is what we are trying to do. But what I'm trying to say is that, look, there's 450,000 barrels of oil. We have 4 refineries in this country that is not working. Those refineries had allocation of 450,000 barrels of oil a day. What's happening to it?
They said they're giving it out in swaps over the years.
And the money
is not being remitted by NNPC mostly.
So that's what you should go and see. NNPC should render the accounts, which is what I've told you. How much is NNPC bringing in? I've given you the questions. I've given you the leads. Talk to the people. Go and write NNPC or invite them to come and talk and give you the information. So information is available. So let them go and define that so that we can get clarity. What they're trying to do with the 10 billion they're raising is simply, you have dividends from LNG, and you need money, so you take the money up front. That's all. So you won't get dividends from them for the next 5 years.
You wrote a paper recently, how we can fix all of this. You talked about how we should grow revenue and all of that. But what are the practical steps? I want you to talk through the paper you wrote. What are the practical steps of growing? Because it's just as if we're all talking in circles. No, we all know the problem, but coming out of it, it astounds all of us.
No, you see, you do these things to prepare for discussions that we're having today. So I'm not going to discuss this on air. So,
okay, Chile. You know. Okay, see, we just had the Nigerian Economic Summit.
Yes.
Okay, annual ritual, you know, certain fallouts there. But there, the president made certain commitments about the government going to clear forex backlog, right? They call it about $7 billion or something.
Yes.
Right? Now, this morning, Rochus Odiri was on this program and he was talking about the Naira appreciating and all of that. Do you have confidence in this new CBN team? Do you think that some of the steps that Cardoso and his team have, taken will solve the problem? Or this is just a flash in the pan?
Okay, let me just say that I was fortunate enough to engage them during the during the economic summit, one-on-one in some of the fallout groups. So, you know, when you do that, then what you need to do is to some of the things that we've talked about there, because of the Chatham House rules, I can't really say too much because. But
no, the Economic Summit Group is not a secret society.
No, it's not a secret society.
The summit was conducted in the open.
In the open, fine.
To share the outcomes with us.
That's what I'm trying to say. What I can share in terms of engaging is what the central bank governor said in the summit. So my own way now is the fact that it's too early for me to judge What they've started doing now is they started intervening in the market to clear the backlogs, which is good. And from what he said, he's outlined a FX policy that he's going to come up with. And we're waiting for the FX policy. And he's talked about beginning to gradually clear the backlog from that point of view. And so my own perspective, if you ask the confidence we're having, is that we need to wait for them and understand exactly what they want to do. So for me, what is important, first of all, is that he's talked about a new FX policy. Then they've started intervening in the market, clearing the backlog, which is sending strong signals to the markets. Because I think yesterday, a lot of banks received money, some 100 million, some 50, to be able to start. So that's a positive signal. That's a step in a positive direction. And if they can continue that gradually over a period of time, then you restore confidence into the market. So that's a step in the right direction. On the other side, what is also important is the MPC, which is what we've told you, that we're waiting for them to do their inaugural monetary policy committee from this new team, so that we'll be able to understand exactly how they want to set the policy directions. So I think for the central bank, we still have some waiting to do in terms of how they're going to do. But so far, so good, because as we can see, the Naira is beginning to appreciate. And with this intervention, prices are coming down and the speculation is reducing. And we're seeing Naira going down to 1,000 from 1,300 within like 5 days, which is quite significant. So those are positive steps. And, because, we need to also be very careful, because, the person who is doing the tax reform committee is also speaking on foreign exchange, which is sending wrong signals. You see, so that also is something I don't also want to start to go into that fray, because the person that is doing the tax reform should stop talking about foreign exchange policy. Yes, he should stop talking about foreign exchange policy. That's not his line, because you will send mixed signals to the market. So that's why there's, when you are signaling and you're communicating, and there's a bit of fuzziness, it's important to clarify it, and then, one doesn't add to it to create more confusion. But what the central bank is doing is what they're supposed to do. Central banks don't announce. Let them intervene. They telegraph their messages, and this is what they're doing. But they didn't need to announce, we're going to intervene in the market tomorrow. No.
So guys, you have seen it for yourself. Honestly, this government don't even know what they are doing. They don't know. No doubt they try to smuggle themselves into this position because they have another thing, in plan. Not just the interests of Nigerians. You have seen it for yourself. This is how are we going to even manage this for the next 3+ years? That is the question everybody should be asking. How are we going to cope with this kind of government that is clueless for the next years, and they are still planning to come back to power in 2027? God forbid. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you.